Welcome back to Joko Yo. There's a question that hangs over a lot of small towns in America. One that gets asked in diners and county commissioner meetings and on front porches when no one thinks anyone else is listening. What happened? Well, that's a big question. Well, today we're going to answer at least one version of that question, at least for one small town. Well, not really small. And the answer is going to be more complicated and more interesting and honestly more honest than most people expect. The town today is Selma, and the story starts with a number. That number is 816. Now, in 1900, Selma, North Carolina had 816 residents. That doesn't sound like much, but here's what matters. By 1900, Selma, at the junction of two railroads, had grown to become Johnston County's largest town. It had surpassed Smithfield, which, honestly, wasn't really hard to do. It was bigger than the county seat. The town that had existed since 1777. The town that had been the center of Johnston County's civic and commercial life for over a century. Selma beat it, and it was kind of brand new. At the turn of the 20th century, Selma was the biggest town in the county, and it got there in less than 40 years. On May 1st, 1867, lots were sold around a newly established station on the North Carolina Railroad. From those lots, the town was built. 33 years from a railroad station to the county's biggest town. That is a genuinely remarkable thing. And to understand why it happened so fast, you have to understand what railroads meant in 1867. Not Amtrak, not a tourist train, a railroad. In 1867, it was the internet, man. It was the interstate highway. It was every supply chain that ever mattered compressed into two steel rails. Selma gained importance in the late 1800s at the junction of the North Carolina and Atlantic Coastline Railroads, a position that left Johnston County poised for unprecedented commercial and industrial growth. Two railroads. Not one, two. And that's the whole ballgame right there. If you sat at the intersection of two major rail lines in the American South in 1890, you're going to be somebody, and Selma was somebody. Cotton came pouring into Selma's warehouses from farms across the county. Merchants set up shop along the tracks, hotels open, banks open, and then, because you can't have a booming cotton trade without somewhere to process cotton, Selma saw the establishment of 3 cotton mills during the first decade of the 20th century. 3 mills. That's kind of a big deal. Those mills didn't just employ people, they built entire worlds. Mill villages went up around them, company housing, company stores, company churches. Families moved in from the surrounding farmland. Children went to work, and we've done a whole episode on that if you haven't heard it, but that's another conversation. Brick buildings went up along Raiford Street, a bank with a proper facade, an opera house, a Selma manufacturing company that doubled as a furniture store. By 1924, Johnston County had more than 85,000 acres planted in cotton and just 10,012 in tobacco. King cotton. That wasn't just a metaphor. That was the actual economic reality. Cotton was everything. And then it wasn't. So here's where the story gets hard, because the decline of cotton in Johnston County wasn't a single dramatic event. It was a slow motion catastrophe with multiple causes, each one landing like a body blow. First came the boll weevil. By 1920, the boll weevil had arrived in the Carolinas, destroying 70% of cotton crops in 2 years. A small beetle. A pest that crossed the Rio Grande from Mexico in 1892 and spent the next 3 decades eating its way through the entire American South. There was no effective way to stop it. You could spray, you could trap, you could pray. It didn't matter. That weevil just kept eating. Then came overproduction. The global cotton market had been flooded during and after World War I, and when the war demand collapsed, cotton prices plummeted from 38 cents a pound in 1919 to 17 cents a pound a year later, and to less than 5 cents a pound by 1932. 5 cents a pound. Cotton that costs more than that to grow and pick and ship. You could not make money growing cotton in 1932. You're guaranteed to lose. You couldn't even break even. You're paying to participate in your own ruin. And then came the Great Depression, which took everything that was already broken and shattered it even further. The Great Depression in the 1930s brought cotton's demise here as it did elsewhere, and today, not a single cotton or textile plant remains in operation in either Selma or Smithfield. 3 mills, all of them gone. Bam. I mean, eventually. The closing wasn't instantaneous. It happened in stages across decades, but the direction was clear from the moment the boll weevil arrived. Selma had built its entire identity on a single crop, processed by mills that ran on the crop's existence. And when the crop collapsed, the mills went with it. And when the mills went, the town's economic engine went quiet. Now, here's where I want to zoom out for a moment, because Selma's story is not unique. It is, in fact, one of the most common stories in American economic history. The names change, the industry changes, but the structure is the same every time. Lowell, Massachusetts. Lowell, Massachusetts was once the center of textile production in the United States, was described in Harper's Magazine as a depressed industrial desert as early as 1931, as its textile concerns were uprooted and sent southward, meaning places like Selma. The North's decline became the South's boom, and then the South's boom became the South's decline when the work moved overseas. West Virginia coal towns, steel towns in Pennsylvania, auto towns in Michigan. The story is the same. When the industry faltered, even meticulously planned towns could not hold their populations. Layoffs translated directly into empty houses, shuttered stores, and declining civic institutions. The economists call it single industry dependence. When your town is built on one thing, coal, steel, iron, cotton, automobiles, you're a one bad decade away from catastrophe, and the bad decade always comes eventually. Sometimes it's a beetle. Sometimes it's a trade agreement. Sometimes it's technology that makes your workers redundant. But it comes. Always. What makes Selma interesting, what makes it worth talking about in, like now, is what happened after. By the time Bruce Radford became town manager of Selma in 1992, over 25 buildings in downtown were sitting vacant. Selma was not dead, Radford said, but it was in intensive care. 25 empty buildings on Raiford Street, which had once been the commercial heart of Johnston County's largest town. Brick storefronts with boarded windows, a hotel district with no reason to exist, a depot that trains still ran through but nobody used. The question was, what do you do when the thing that made you is gone? One Sunday morning in 1997, somewhere between the 7th and 8th hole of a golf course, the word antiques came to Radford's mind. He designed a plan to entice antique shops. The town would pay 1 year of rent for any antique or art store owner who set up shop in downtown Selma. By the end of the effort, 2 shop owners had taken the city up on the free rent, and over 20 of the buildings downtown were sold. 2 shops, that's it. The initial result of a bold, scrappy bet on Selma's future was 2 shops. But those 2 shops brought people, and the people brought attention, and the attention brought more shops. Today, Selma has more than 100,000 square feet of antique retail shops, and it's revitalized downtown. Movie crews from Wilmington drive up to find props. Travelers pull off I-95. The 301 Endless Yard Sale draws people to Selma from across the state. It's not the cotton boom of 1900, no. Selma's not about to surpass Smithfield again, but it's something. For decades following its birth in 1873, it was a busy railroad hub, and in the 90s, Selma was in intensive care. Things picked up in the early aughts, and now, slowly and perfectly, on a much smaller scale than the glory days, y'all, Selma's coming back. There's a lesson here, and I want to say it plainly because I think it matters beyond Johnston County. The story of Selma, the rise of the railroad, the boom on cotton, the collapse when cotton went, the slow revival on antiques and heritage tourism is essentially the story of every rural American town that's ever bet everything on one industry. The details are local, the patterns are universal. Now, right now, there are hundreds of towns across America having the same conversation Selma was having in 1992. The mine closed. The plant moved to Mexico. The mill automated. The Walmart came and then left. And now there are 25 empty buildings on Main Street and a town manager staying up at night asking, what do we do? We got lots of those towns around us. Someone doesn't have a perfect answer, but it has an answer. And the answer is, look at what you actually have. Good bones, old brick, a history that people are curious about, a location on a road somebody travels, and you find the thing that fits those bones. You don't try to rebuild 1900. You can't do that. You build what's possible in the present. Antiques brought people down to Selma who would never have gone there, Radford said. To be welcoming to people is in their DNA. They form an instant relationship with customers. The DNA of a place, that's not a trivial thing. It's better than the railroad. It's better than cotton. Selma was built by people who knew how to show up. Farmers who came to market, travelers who came through on the train, mill workers who came from the countryside. Hospitality was always part of the deal. The cotton, well, it's gone, but the welcome, it's not. And then there's the thing nobody in 1900 could have ever predicted. The thing that makes the Selma story genuinely strange and genuinely worth watching. Right now, at the intersection of 95 and 70 on the edge of town, something enormous is being built. Eastfield is a 435-acre mixed-use development, a combination of manufacturing, retail, hospitality, and both single and multi-family residential properties entitled for over 3 million square feet of developed space. 3 million square feet in Selma. The first phase of retail tenants opened in October of 24, including the Academy Sports, Ross, Burlington, Five Below, Ulta Marshalls, Old Navy, Hobby Lobby. You know, those ones that occupy strip malls. Future phases include Target, which I think that's opening any time now, and other retail and dining options. And as of early 2026, BJ's Wholesale Club and Olive Garden, Longhorn Steakhouse have all opened at Eastfield. Johnston County's first Target store. I mean, we're not Wake County. We're not ever, Smithfield's never going to be Raleigh. It's not going to happen that way. So to have a Target and it's your first one, that's kind of something, at least for Johnston County. Its first Target store, approximately 130,000 square feet, located at 551 St. Mark Avenue, is coming to Selma. It's coming to Selma, not Smithfield, not Clayton, Selma. Now, there are a few things worth holding in your head at the same time here. One, this is genuinely significant. A preliminary economic analysis of the Eastfield Crossing development showed it could create between 3,500 and 5,500 jobs when finished. That's not a rounding error, man. That's transformative. Two, the developers are not oblivious to what they're building on. The developer says paying attention to Johnston County's roots in agriculture has been a big component. Instead of a golf course community, they envision a farm community. Residential properties tied to working farms, what planners call agri-hoods. That's a new term for you. They've got a farmer's market planned. They're talking about Eastfield restaurants buying sweet potatoes from farms down the road. Whether that vision fully materializes remains to be seen, but the intention has been stated. 3, and this is the part that stopped me when I read it. When asked why Eastfield is where it is, the developers point to the location's highway network and to something else. North, south, east, and west rail access, the railroad. Again. The railroad. Again. 150 years after the first lots were sold around Mitchener Station, the reason to be in Selma is still, in part, the railroad. As I've told my students for years, history does not repeat itself. Not exactly. But it sure does rhyme. Drive through Selma. The depot still squats by the tracks, the one that was supposed to be torn down in 1975 and wasn't because the town objected. Amtrak's Palmetto and Carolinian still stop there twice a day. The brick buildings on Raiford Street are full of antique dealers and a tap room in the old town hall. There used to be a shop in Selma I used to hit all the time to buy records. And a mile away, bulldozers and cranes are rearranging the landscape in ways the cotton mill of 1900 would have never imagined. The downtown Selma Historic District was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2010. The same town in the same decade is, well, almost, getting its first target. Both of those things are true simultaneously. The past is preserved, and the future is arriving. Man, that's a complicated, interesting, genuinely American thing to watch happen in real time. 816 people, 2 railroads, 3 cotton mills, 1 beetle, 25 empty storefronts, 2 antique shops, and now 3 million square feet of new development anchored, of all things, by the railroad that started the whole story to begin with. Selma's still here, still becoming, still working it out. And that's what Selma was, and is, and heck might be. Next time, got a new episode for you, and until then, be good.